Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 244. New Story. Part 1. I will create a new story that never existed before. The constellations shut their mouths at my words. It wasn't just because they were shocked. Rather, they didn't understand what I was saying. The first one to speak was a constellation drinking beside Thor. What do you mean by a new story? According to Ways of Survival, the Dokkaebi king left these words a long time ago. There are no new stories in the star stream. All stories are just based on old stories. This old saying was the humility of the Dokkaebis and was a phrase that needed to be overcome. I hesitated to answer, and a hot-tempered constellation came out first. Is there a sword master in the story? Sword master? I nodded at the unexpected question. There is. Some constellations sighed at my response, while others had shining eyes. Then another constellation asked. Is there a great magician? Maybe one will appear. A reincarnator? Yes. An SSS grade hunter? For reference, I like friends who are rewarded for a reasonable effort. It is a possibility. I don't dislike this who try hard. A returnee will naturally come out. The various questions continued for a while, as if it was fun. In the process, there were those who smiled and those who shook their heads. No matter their expression, they were all imagining a story. It was a story that hadn't been created yet. However, it was a story that might exist. Was it because it had been a long time since the Gourmet Association jumped into such imagination? For a while, there was a gentle atmosphere in the hall that didn't fit the Gourmet Association. However, the atmosphere didn't stay like this. I don't understand. Aren't there many of these stories already? The one who poured cold water on it was the Morning Star Goddess. Sword masters, great magicians, reincarnators, returnees, what is new about this story? I don't know how such a product can be considered as new. I thought for a moment before replying. It isn't just new materials that make up a new story. Aren't the first generation stories that the Gourmet Association likes also made up of ordinary materials? Are you comparing the first generation of art with your story? I don't mean to compare it. In the first place, I'm not trying to make art. Some constellations looked disappointed at my words. The Morning Star Goddess laughed like it was ridiculous. You are speaking vulgar words. Yes, good. Then what is new about your story? The atmosphere of the constellations was changing again. As expected, I couldn't throw a few things around casually. I faced them and declared in my true voice. In the story I'm creating, there will be an end to all scenarios. The end of all the scenarios. The atmosphere instantly froze. How dare you? Some people muttered, while other constellations became pale. There was a backlash that didn't occur even when I mentioned the first generation. Perhaps it was because I broke their taboo. I felt the gazes pouring towards me and closed my eyes. This wouldn't dramatically change the situation. However, my story would remain deep in the mind of the constellations. It was enough for now. Crazy bastard. By the way, it seemed that the impression I gave them was too deep. The voice filled with hostility continued. I knew that there were all types of crazy people in the Gourmet Association, but this time it is quite good. Are you in your right mind to say such words? It was a green doll with a dragon's head. It was the Brash Swamp Predator. A constellation who was active in the previous scenario. His smile was full of ridicule as he continued. Then what do you want us to help you with? Let's go together to the end of the scenario, is that what you want to say? That's right. I came here to find constellations who will reach the end of the scenario with me. My calm declaration caused the countenance of the constellations to change. Some of them had already joined a nebula. Thus, my words would sound like a provocation. Nebula? What is the name of the nebula? There is no name yet. I haven't formally established it. How many founding members are there? 2. The scorn of the constellations increased. I felt a bit upset, but I put up with it. In any case, this was considered courtesy in the Gourmet Association. I didn't think any of them would just accept it. The Morning Star Goddess asked, "One is you, and the other person? Is it a constellation?" "It isn't a constellation." I hesitated to reveal Yu Jong-hyuk. The brash swamp predator wondered, "Perhaps it is that guy?" Images were playing from a panel on the screen. It was playing the finals of the martial arts competition in First Murim. "It is finally the confrontation you were waiting for." The camera focused on a man as the moderator spoke. The disciple of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint, Supreme King Yu Jong-hyuk. As expected, Yu Jong-hyuk had safely reached the finals. Then the opponent. One of the Murim's 10 Grand Masters, the Ice Flower Goddess, Zhuge Lingling. A splendid spotlight shone on Zhuge Lingling, who was dressed in a light t-shirt and jeans. The Ice Flower Goddess wasn't an easy opponent. She was one of the transcendent existences that represented Murim. Originally, Yu Jong-hyuk wouldn't have been able to compete with her. It depended on how much progress he made in the Breaking the Sky swordsmanship in the meantime. Cough. My mind became wide awake the moment someone made a sound. I looked around. Then I gradually became angry. Damn it. Someone had uploaded this video. I stared at Anna Croft, who was standing in a corner of the stage. However, based on her expression, it didn't seem to be her. If so, the video. Hoo-hoo, a feast of mortals. The brash swamp predator laughed. Gosh, this is really losing steam. An existence that just reached the narrative level and a trivial mortal is discussing the end of the story? Several constellations laughed like they had been waiting. It was a laugh that denied all the words I had spoken. Maybe I expected it to be like this. It might have been wrong to expect anything from the constellations in the first place. Ha ha ha, what is the modifier of this constellation? Was it Demon King of Bragging? Queen of the Underworld. You brought a very delightful friend. On the screen, Yu Jong-hyuk was confronting the Ice Flower Goddess. The brash swamp predator chuckled like he thought it was cute. This scenario seems tough for him, let alone the end of the scenarios. I quietly clenched my fists. I knew the path Yu Jong-hyuk would walk and the achievement he would make in the future. I knew very well that the hardworking guy would one day kill every member of this damn Gourmet Association. Yet in the eyes of the constellations present here, the current Yu Jong-hyuk was just a trivial mortal. This worked out well. I am bored because the scenario is over. Do you want to make a bet? Who will win between the two bugs? Oh, good, good. A number of constellations agreed with the proposal of the brash swamp predator. Then a system message appeared. A new sub-scenario has arrived. The sub-scenario, Gourmet Association betting has begun. Numerous selection windows emerged in front of the constellations. I'll bet 50,000 coins on that female. The moment the brash swamp predator cried out, the other constellations laughed and bet a few coins. Then the brash swamp predator glanced at me. Newcomer. You should also bet. I already did it. Who did you bet on? 100,000 coins to Yu Jong-hyuk. The fact that I bet twice as much as him caused the brash swamp predator's eyes to widen. Cheeky fellow. You will regret it. He seemed to know how this bet would turn out. In the distance, Anna Croft was watching me with serene eyes. Yu Jong-hyuk's struggle was entering the mid-stages on the screen. Oh, he is fairly decent? Should I make him my incarnation? Yu Jong-hyuk seemed to be pushed at first, but his momentum was slowly becoming stronger. Some of the constellations admired the unexpected flow of events. Then they shut up as soon as the brash swamp predator glared at them. As expected from Yu Jong-hyuk. His encounter with the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was much earlier than planned, and his Breaking the Sky swordsmanship had reached higher than the original level. Inside the stadium, the Breaking the Sky energy exploded and the Ice Flower Goddess coughed up blood as she rolled through the dust. The situation had completely tilted to one side. The story flowed to an unexpected place, and the expression of the brash swamp predator changed. It isn't fun like this. The moment I had an ominous feeling, sparks appeared around several members of the Gourmet Association, including the brash swamp predator. I quickly realized what they were doing. Their sparks spread to the screen showing the martial arts competition. To be exact, it was to the Ice Flower Goddess. Aak! The Ice Flower Goddess screamed, and this was followed by the host's words. What is this? Yu Jonghyuk also seemed surprised. Yu Jonghyuk's expression stiffened as the Ice Flower Goddess mutated into a monster. I stared at the brash swamp predator and spoke in a cold voice. Didn't you say this was a bet? The brash swamp predator laughed. I didn't say there could be no interference. Thanks to the probability supplied by many constellations, the body of the Ice Flower Goddess was covered in green scales. Both Yu Jonghyuk and I knew what it meant. It was a constellation's advent. It was the same in Peaceland and Dark Castle. At the time, Yu Jonghyuk and I fought together, but not anymore. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint has been activated. You can't connect with the current target. Damn jerk, what was he doing at a time like this? It was impossible to use Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint because Yu Jonghyuk wasn't thinking about me at all. On the screen, the Ice Flower Goddess who was half a green dragon roared. The brash swamp predator. The ancient being who was born on the planet Selegidon was a constellation who just reached the narrative grade like me. However, the number of stories he accumulated was far beyond me, so our abilities were on a different level. With one breath, the monster half destroyed the venue of the martial arts competition. Maybe he signed a sponsor contract with the Ice Flower Goddess for a short period of time. The low rate of synchronization meant not a lot of his strength was expressed. Still, it would be nothing to end the competition since it was strengthened with such a degree of probability. It would be hard to deal with a narrative-grade constellation who had accumulated such stories, even if it was Yu Jonghyuk. You look uneasy. Don't you believe in your colleague? I looked around and saw Persephone smiling as usual. I didn't believe in him? It was a natural story. I couldn't believe in that sunfish who often died. I believe in him. Even so, I answered it like this. Persephone's eyes flashed at my natural answer. In the first place, I came here because I believed in him. I stared at Yu Jonghyuk on the screen. It didn't matter how many times he was defeated, broken, or felt despair. He was a person who didn't give up until the end. If I couldn't believe in him, who could I believe in the first place? Even if this round failed, this guy would surely see the ending of this world eventually. I slowly closed my eyes before opening them again. I'll raise my bet. I'll make it 1 million coins. Chapter 245. New Story. Part 2. The constellation Demon King of Salvation has placed 1 million coins on the incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. The system message resonated in the hall and the attention of the constellations focused on me. I bet my money on a fight that was obviously disadvantageous. My actions intrigued some of the constellations. The constellation Thursday's Thunder is showing favorability to you. The constellation Morning Star Goddess is showing favorability to you. However, only a few constellations showed such a response. Most of the constellations were swept away by the heat of the gambling. Ha ha ha. You are crazy. If so, I'll bet 500,000 coins. The brash swamp predator, who bet on the Ice Flower Goddess from the beginning, opened his mouth first. Then the watching constellations started to join one by one. The constellation Tranquil Island Gourmet has placed 20,000 coins on the constellation Juga Lingling. The constellation Master of the White Castle has placed 30,000 coins on the constellation Juga Lingling. The messages were pouring out. Most of them were messages giving coins to the Ice Flower Goddess, Juga Lingling. I was the only one who was on Yu Jonghyuk's side. The constellation Queen of the Darkest Spring has placed 300,000 coins on the incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. Huh? I reflexively glanced at Persephone, who was giving a mysterious smile. I asked in a slightly worried tone, "Will it be okay?" Why are you asking if it will be okay?" I was the one who had nothing to reply. Maybe it was nothing for Persephone to bet 300,000 coins. By the way, there was a meddlesome man beside me. Old hag. Doesn't Hades nag you when you spend money like this? I'm not a grandmother, so the mass production maker should mind your words. An old woman at your age should eat moderately. Watch your mouth unless you want to be stuck in Tartarus. Wait, did you bet as well? The mass production maker laughed at Persephone's question. The constellation mass production maker has placed 150,000 coins on the incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. The mass production maker looked at me and said, "I didn't bet a lot because I didn't receive that much gold from this month's Dokkaebi bag settlement." In fact, he bet the exact price of Ioran's sword that I bought. Maybe there would be no income apart from the commission fee. In any case, I was grateful to them. Thanks to this, more excited constellations were betting coins. The constellation Goddess of Joy and Celebration has placed 50,000 coins on the constellation Juga Lingling. The coins placed on the bet snowballed and soon surpassed 6 million coins. Now the constellations of the Gourmet Association couldn't help shifting their gaze to one place. Die. Kill him quickly. I'll kill you if I lose my coins. They were no different from the human spectators in the arena. I felt strangely excited despite experiencing these stories. The mass production maker laughed as if he read my heart. I've gone through these stories, so I'm hungrier for these stories. Maybe not. Whether it is a constellation or human, they are all just children in front of the story. By the way, is there a chance of winning? Do you feel uneasy? No, it isn't like that. If there isn't a chance to win, I'll have to make it. To be precise, I had to make it a high multiplier. If Yu Jonghyuk died, this round would be ruined. If the situation was like this, it was better to do it properly. The exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, has been activated. We couldn't lose. You can't connect with the current target. Shit, Yu Jonghyuk. I was still getting this message. However, it wasn't the only method. Bayu. Bot. As I waited, Bayu moved her hand and a personal panel popped up in front of me. The screen soon unfolded. The brash swamp predator cried out strangely and let out a terrible poisonous fog. Yuak. Everyone touched by the smoke screamed as they oxidized. Judging from the brash swamp predator's state, he was using roughly 1/3 of his status. 1/3 was enough to ruin the venue. The surrounding constellations were also supporting his use of probability. The grounds of the venue were split apart by the monster's feet. It was a terrible destructive power. However, it wasn't as strong compared to Peaceland or Dark Castle. At those times, the outer gods had descended. Still, there was no guarantee that this situation was better than Peaceland or Dark Castle. In Peaceland, there was the paradox Baekjung, Kyrios. In Dark Castle, there was Goryeo first sword. Then who was present now? The constellation Demon King of Salvation is looking at incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk frowned at my message. Kim Dokja. Is your work finished? The constellation Demon King of Salvation says it is still in progress. Still? At this moment, a shadow of suspicion filled Yu Jonghyuk's eyes. Yu Jonghyuk stared at the brash swamp predator and asked, "Perhaps, did this guy appear because of you?" The bastard noticed quickly. Kim Dokja? He was filled with tremendous anger. I reached out as an apology. The constellation Demon King of Salvation has sponsored 100 coins to the incarnation Yu Jonghyuk. I don't need it. Then the brash swamp predator moved. He was an ancient lizard that governed all the swamps on his planet. The embodiment of his head was suddenly rising from the back of the ice flower goddess who had become a lizard. There was a terrible scream as the incarnation was deprived of her body. The lizard screamed and rushed forward, swinging a huge tail towards Yu Jonghyuk. The tail of the lizard smashed through Yu Jonghyuk's strong self-defense, and he was hit hard. Kook. Yu Jonghyuk didn't seem to have reached the second stage of transcendence yet. Well, it would be impossible for even Yu Jonghyuk to reach the second stage of transcendence in just 2 weeks. It could be called a devil's talent that he could drive the first stage ice flower goddess to such a state. Then there wasn't much time. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is making a request. Yu Jonghyuk had experienced Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint several times, and should I what I was asking for? By the way, Yu Jonghyuk's reaction was unexpected. I don't want to. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says if this continues, everyone will die. I won't die. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says it isn't the time to be stubborn. I wasn't convinced I could knock down that monster even if I used electrification in Yu Jonghyuk's body. There might be a way to use the fourth wall like last time, but it was only possible for constellations who used mental skills. Yu Jonghyuk used swift footwork to attack, and the brash swamp predator once again prepared his poison. Based on the number of sparks around his mouth, this was a really devastating attack. I urged Yu Jonghyuk, but Yu Jonghyuk was adamant. Go and do what you have to do. Kim Dokja. I panicked at the unexpected action. No, why was this bastard so stubborn today? I hurriedly looked around. Since it was like this, I had to borrow another hand, even if the martial arts competition was ruined. In this place, there was only one person strong enough to help us. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint, Namgung Minyoung. She was a powerhouse who wouldn't be pushed by Kyrios or Chiok Junyong. Thus, she could deal with this monster alone. Soon afterwards, I found the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint sitting in the audience while eating dumplings. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is asking for help. Despite my message, the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint just kept chewing the dumplings. She sometimes fed dumplings to the Breaking the Sky Master lying next to her. In the seats below them, Jang Haeung and Han Myungo were sitting beside each other while also eating dumplings. What were these humans doing? Then I once again sent a message. The constellation Demon King of Salvation. At this moment, Yu Jonghyuk spoke. Shin Yu-sung. Are you listening? Bayu appeared along with these words. Bot? Turn off Kim Dokja's screen. Bayu glanced at Yu Jonghyuk like it was difficult. I didn't know how much of Shin Yu-sung's memory survived, but when I thought about it, these two people had a very complex relationship. Nevertheless, this was a story from before her rebirth. Now it was different. There was no reason for Bayu to listen to Yu Jonghyuk when she was my Dokkaebi. Yet Bayu sitting on my shoulders suddenly looked at me with a sorry expression. Bot. Bayu? Bot. Coo. There was absurd acting, and Bayu pretended to fall asleep. At the same time, my personal panel turned off and Yu Jonghyuk's appearance disappeared. You have been disconnected. No, what is this? I didn't know what was happening. Why did Bayu act like this all of a sudden? There was no mention of this situation in the revised ways of survival. Wah! There was a sudden scream and I turned my attention to the panel installed on the stage. The surprised constellation started moving towards the panel. Persephone and the mass production maker were also approaching the panel. The screen was completely obscured by the more than 100 constellations gathered in front of it. No, wait a minute. Let me look. I tried to enter any gaps, but the cluster of constellations was too hard. All I could hear was the sound of thunder from the screen. Still, it was clear from the sound alone. It was the Breaking the Sky Thunder Sword. It was the real Thunder Sword, unlike what I had stolen. It seemed to be a devastating hit as the brash swamp predator let out a huge scream. The answer was obvious even without looking. Fortunately, there was the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. I let out a sigh of relief. Yu Jonghyuk was unharmed because the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint had acted. Thanks to this, the martial arts competition would be cancelled, but it was better than Yu Jonghyuk dying. Then someone suddenly shouted. Oh, the disciple of the Breaking the Sky Sword. Breaking the Sky Sword Beauty. Breaking the Sky Sword Beauty? We shouldn't disparage an incarnation's martial arts. How is this? Wasn't it only the power of transcendence? Ha ha ha, it is an interesting ability. Is it something that Asgardian person did? It isn't to my taste. The true voices in the halls were becoming heated up for an unknown reason. The constellation prisoner of the golden headband is astonished. The constellation who likes to change sex is struggling with pleasure. The constellation demon-like judge of fire is shedding resentful tears. The channel and the banquet hall. I was dizzy from the indirect messages coming from everywhere. My coins. No. My coins. Uaya. No, what the hell was going on? I held my breath and used my status to move through the constellations. I barely reached the front of the panel and another tremendous lightning attack came from the screen. The entire screen turned white from the powerful lightning. The light slowly faded and once it disappeared, black ashes were scattered like snow. In front of my eyes, one man was standing still. It was the appearance of Yu Jonghyuk, who had raised his sword with an arrogant expression. Under his feet, while a giant lizard charred by lightning. Yu Jonghyuk stepped off the lizard's body and walked to one corner of the venue, pulling out something black that had been plugged in. There is no second place in this competition. It was the Black Demon Sword. Thus, this is mine. Then the host's voice rang out. The winner of the martial arts competition has been decided. I didn't know how such a thing was possible. I rubbed my eyes and glanced again. The situation was still the same. It wasn't the Breaking the Sky Sword saint but Yu Jonghyuk? The winner is the Breaking the Sky Sword Beauty, Yu Jonghyuk. No, what the hell was the Breaking the Sky Sword Beauty? My questions didn't last for long. It was due to the overwhelming system messages that entered my ears. The sub-scenario, Gourmet Association betting has been completed. You have won the bet. You have acquired a new story. The story Miracle Gambler has been acquired. Then there was the sound of coins falling. The sub-scenario compensation has been acquired. I reflexively checked my number of coins. The number slowly creaked up, as if it was too hard to handle. Coins possessed, 1,986,725 C. Coins possessed, 2,790,876 C. Coins possessed, 3,890,875 C. The coins that the constellations bet were being stacked up like snow on my balance. Chapter 246. New Story. Part 3. Coins possessed, 5,490,875 C. The endlessly climbing coins finally stopped at the peak. I doubted my eyes several times as I stared at this unbelievable number. Young man, how much did you earn? I looked around and saw the mass production maker's blank expression. The old man must have made a great profit since he bet 150,000 coins earlier. The dividend must be at least 5 times. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband envies you. The constellation Lone Shark aiming for the heart is craving your coins. Even the always stern-looking Persephone was smiling. For reference, the Queen of the Underworld bet 300,000 coins. The Underworld must have gained a lot. Nonsense. This is ridiculous. Most of the constellations were filled with great despair apart from the 3 of us. I just needed to see their expressions to know how much coins they had lost. The constellations who bet a small amount to relieve their boredom looked sad, but those who bet over 100,000 coins. They were filled with anger. There were some constellations on the verge of bankruptcy. For example, that guy. The constellation Brash Swamp Predator is revealing enormous hostility towards you. Grab that guy. The constellations who lost their coins, including the Brash Swamp Predator, were approaching me. He lost his reason along with the coins and was prepared to throw himself into Han River. The constellations who noticed withdrew from my side. However, there was one constellation who didn't back down. It was the queen of the underworld, Persephone. Everybody back off. How long are you going to act so ugly? Her status was reminiscent of the cold night air, and the approaching constellations faltered. However, some constellations were so agitated that they couldn't be cooled by the night breeze. Queen of the underworld. Did you win some coins just now? Get out of here. It has nothing to do with you. The atmosphere became heated and some of the watching high-ranking constellations intervened. Maintain your courtesy. It was the morning star goddess who was familiar with Persephone. Nevertheless, the brash swamp predator had already lost his senses and didn't hesitate. Courtesy? Fuck courtesy. As soon as the brash swamp predator released his status, the other constellations also raised their status. Powerful sparks filled the air as a notice of the imminent conflict. The wish ticket used by the constellation Demon King of Salvation is in effect. Suddenly, intense sparks filled the hall and the movements of the agitated constellations stopped. A portal opened on the white ceiling while everyone hesitated. Beyond the portal was a sinister aura. It wasn't an outer god, but it was clearly something immense. Who was this? This was obviously above the highest-ranked constellations. The atmosphere tore apart and a strange creature appeared through the portal. The mysterious aura around his body was unmatched, but he was neither a god or constellation. The man was dressed in a magician's costume with an old-fashioned cane. A Dokkaebi? It was a Dokkaebi. It has been a while, constellations. The hall fell silent with a single sentence, like cold water had been poured on it. It was an overbearing silence. The enraged constellations who had just been screaming were holding their breaths. The rules of the star stream binds all constellations of the Gourmet Association. All the constellations present were constricted by the probability. It was absolutely impossible for an ordinary Dokkaebi, even if they had the channel operating rights. The brash swamp predator, who didn't falter despite the threats from high-ranking constellations, was taking a step back with a white face. I had seen a description of this Dokkaebi in the original novel. Most incarnations think there are only 4 ranks of Dokkaebis. The lesser grade, intermediate grade, semi-advanced, and senior Dokkaebis. However, there are Dokkaebis above them. The Dokkaebis of the star stream, those with up to 12 colored horns, are the first seat. This Dokkaebi had 7 red horns coming from his head. The star stream called them Great Dokkaebis. Sorry, but the party will end here. As I read Ways of Survival, I had a question about the relationship between the constellations and Dokkaebis. The Dokkaebis might have special powers, but a high-ranking constellation could kill 1 or 2 Dokkaebis. Yet even the strong constellations didn't touch the Dokkaebis. No matter how annoying the scenario, they never tried to kill the Dokkaebis. Why? The reason was right in front of me. A single hand gesture trapped all of the Gourmet Association in a net of probability. I had never seen such dense sparks before. This was the power of the story. Perhaps it was a story borrowed from the most powerful beings in the world. Whether it was narrative grade or great grade, they clearly couldn't escape from the storm of sparks without being destroyed. The high-grade constellations such as Thursday's Thunder or Morning Star Goddess didn't complain and only showed unpleasant expressions. It was Persephone who opened her mouth first. Great Dokkaebi, how long? It's been a while. The Great Dokkaebi slowly looked around. It is the ebb and flow. Queen of the underworld. Is the story king well? The king is safe. Due to the opponent, Persephone's expression was in a state of tension that I had never seen before. Why did you come here? In addition, leading Dokkaebis of the executive branch. The Dokkaebis of the executive department whom I had once seen were standing in a line behind the great Dokkaebis. The fearsome pressure they emitted was no less than the Gourmet Association constellations. It was natural. The Dokkaebis of the executive branch were once constellations. Instead of replying immediately to Persephone's words, the great Dokkaebi swept over the constellations. "We are here to pick up the constellations who borrowed coins." Coins? Several constellations groaned and started to run away. The mass production maker muttered with understanding. "They are really foolish." It seemed that some constellations had borrowed coins from the Dokkaebis to make their bets. Funnily enough, one of them was the brash swamp predator. Move out of the way." He rushed to a sparkling wall and tried to rip apart the net of probability. Quack! The great Dokkaebi's net was powerful. The moment he reached the net of sparks, the brash swamp predator screamed. The Dokkaebis of the executive branch bound his incarnation body. Release me." I stared at the rows of constellations and thought about why the Dokkaebis appeared here. I didn't know the exact reason, but I wondered if it was because the probability was influenced by my wish. In this world, the Dokkaebis were the most sensitive to probability. In a flash, the Dokkaebis arrested all the people who owed debts and started to transport them across the portal. It was a swift move like there was nothing to see. The great Dokkaebi didn't say goodbye. He stared as if warning the constellations before turning to leave. The moment before the portal was about to close, the great Dokkaebi glanced at me. Beyond his cool eyes, someone was talking to me. "Don't be too loud, baby. The king is watching you." The great Dokkaebi left and the Gourmet Association ended its meeting. It was natural for the party to end. It was time for the respective constellations to go back. I took advantage of the chaos in the banquet hall to slip out of the castle. A significant number of constellations were dragged away by the bureau, but there were still some hostile to me. Thus, I needed to get out of here before there was trouble. However, I stood at the entrance of Oro Castle and encountered a difficulty I hadn't thought of. How did I get back? There was no guide or carriage. If I delayed here, I might be caught by other constellations. At this time, there was an engine sound and something appeared around the corner of the castle. It was a luxury sports car with a streamlined body. It was a car reminiscent of the SSS class Ferrigini. Wait, the person who made that car. The sports car stopped in front of me with a loud sound. The window rolled down and an elderly man wearing sunglasses appeared. "Get on, young man." It was the mass production maker. The moment the rear doors opened, the central body of the car behind longer and changed into the form of a limousine. I felt pure admiration at the sight as I got into the back seat. How many people could ride in this? Was he selling this car? Now I had money. The body was made from solid protective material that adhered not just to the outside but the inside as well. I drank iced tea from the refrigerator in the limousine and looked around the vehicle. The mass production maker was in the driver's seat while Persephone was in the passenger's seat. Persephone had been communicating with someone since earlier. Perhaps it was related to the great Dokkaebi who appeared. Mass production maker, thank you for your consideration. Still, I have a question. What is it? Why is this woman with you? I glared at Anna Croft, who was sitting next to me. The mass production maker smiled sweetly. Hoo-hoo, I promised to give her a ride. Don't fight too much. It was a very unpleasant situation, but I couldn't complain. I sighed and examined my companions. There were 3 Asgardians along with myself in the back seat. There was the exhausted Iris and stunned Selena Kim. Anna Croft looked at their condition before suddenly speaking to me. Iris would have lived even if you didn't help. I know. Perhaps Thursday's thunder would have saved her. Isn't that right? Anna Croft bit her lips at my words. Anna Croft was a more brutal woman than anyone else, but she didn't lose those who were her own. In face, Anna Croft's colleagues didn't die in the similar event that she held in the original novel. Rather, they awakened through the scenario. It was the other people who died. It was Iris' chance to get a good sponsor, and you ruined everything. The future I saw wasn't like this. She wouldn't have wanted to get a sponsor in that way. You don't know who the constellation was. TSK. I told you to get along, but I guess it isn't possible. The form of the limousine changed, and my seat showed strange movements. My vision blurred, and I was sitting in the passenger seat where Persephone had been. The mass production maker had changed my position with Persephone. Maybe he didn't want to hear fighting, or perhaps there was a sound barrier between the front and back seats. The mass production maker told me, "You're on bad terms with incarnations as well as constellations. Don't make too many enemies." I don't want to make enemies either. In fact, I came here to seek colleagues rather than enemies. As a result, it turned out like this. The mass production maker took out an electronic cigarette and spoke. "I felt anger in your story. There is a strong rage against this world and the constellations." I tried to say something but fell silent. "I know that you saw many things that shouldn't be seen today." "Not at all." The mass production maker laughed. I somehow felt awkward and took out my smartphone. The darkness was like a screen in the front of the car. The mass production maker gazed silently at the darkness, and there was a slight sadness. "Still, don't hate them so much." It took some time for me to understand his words. They just couldn't stand the loneliness. Whether it is a garbage or a noble constellation, they all acted like that because they liked the story. I was confused, because I didn't know the mass production maker would say such words. A strange feeling of betrayal filled my chest. This doesn't mean they can trample on the lives of incarnations. If they liked the story, they could do their own scenarios. Instead of ruining the scenario of others, they could move on to the next scenario. Turning to another scenario and selling their minds was just avoiding reality. I tried to say this. At that moment, the smartphone turned on and ways of survival came into view. The last sentence I had been reading was on the screen. I stared blankly at the sentences, and the mass production maker asked, "You are always looking at that. Are you going to write something on an empty notebook?" I couldn't find a way to answer the question, but I soon smiled weakly and replied, "I just feel steady when I look at this." In the distance, the darkness of the dark dimension could be seen. A light emerged from an empty window. Finally, it was time to go back.